Hi, I'm Doug Oppliger, and I want to introduce a presentation about the history of competitive skiing at Michigan Tech. Now, this presentation isn't the history, or a history even, but it's about a history project that I've been working on for a while. The project is unfinished. There's a lot of pieces yet to be put into the puzzle, but I've worked a lot on finding information from more in the past. And so what I'm going to present today is kind of the process of how I've found and put this information together to this point, and then a little bit about some specific years along the way. So I'll talk about some of the history, and most of that's going to be from the very earliest days in the 1920s to the 70s. And between the 70s and today, and I realize that's a long time, I'm leaving a whole lot out. So I'm hoping not offending too many people, but that's basically what it's about. So it's about the process and a little bit about some of the bits and pieces between the early days and today. The next steps in the project, like where is this going, is still to be determined. I don't have plans like publish a book or anything. That could happen, but that's not a set plan at this point. But what I do want to do is get all this information compiled and kind of put in a place where others can get it. There will be some sort of publication, probably a digital one coming along. But as I've said, I got a lot of work to do, especially between, say, 1980 and kind of the current times. And so I'm interviewing a lot of people, and if any of you out there have information and you'd like to be part of the project, I'd love to have you join, or maybe you know others who'd like to help out. It's been a great project, and one of the greatest things has been talking to ex-skiers or people who've been involved with the ski program. So I hope to do a lot more of that. So I hope you enjoy what we're going to see today, and maybe we'll talk later. Thank you. This is the first time I've done this, so I'm going to start out by trying to change my slides and say why I'm nervous. Because number one, there's lots of you. And I'm just, there's a whole lot of history that's happened over a long period of time. And we'll get a little bit into that. And I'm not a historian. If I'm anything, I'm an engineer and I'm a teacher. But my working definition of what history is and sort of what I'm working from here is printed here in the slide. The story of what happened, pieced together from what was preserved and told by, in this case, a person or a group. So there's those three parts kind of weigh in to what you're going to end up with. And sometimes what was preserved can be maddening in its the fact that it's wrong, or the fact that it's gone, not there, you can't find things. So this is what I'm going to do is tell you how I put this thing together so far, where I'm at. I'm nervous about leaving things out because I know there are 100 of you out there. Many of you are, if not all of you, helped make this history, skied this history into existence, and you know something that I don't. And it's very likely I'm going to leave your part of it out. And so I hope you're not too mad at me, but if you are, that's fine. I am always interested in learning more, and I learned so much from all of you. I've been involved with skiing with the race organization here for quite some time. I have a family that skis along with me. And a lot of you probably know my family pretty well. I'm an engineer with no background in writing history, and some of that will probably show through here. But as Tom said, and I think I've already said, I love to ski and I love everything about skiing. I'm a fan of skiing. I'm a fan of Michigan Tech and a fan of the Michigan Tech ski program. And it's so great that Tom is here. He's such a positive force these days. And as you probably are aware, this past season for Michigan Tech was a really, really great season, and just added a little more to this amazing story. So my goals are to keep your attention, to elicit your questions. As Tom said, you can use the Q&A button. I want to outline my work to date and maybe mention some potential outcomes, because what I'm presenting here isn't the project, it's just some slices of it. And I intend to present a bit of that story. I think I want to have fun. So far, when my slides work, it is fun. And to impart some learning to the audience here, because I am a teacher and I've been taught when I do these things to have learning goals. So the learning goals, by the end of this presentation, the students should be able to, and in this case, maybe not do things, but have a sense of how I'm going about this project, the time span, some of the highs, lows, turning points. And we're going to dig into just a few of the historical individuals and our events along the way. And to my former students, because I know there are a few of you out there, yes, this will be on the test. And the test is going to come in the form of polls that we're going to run to keep you awake and maybe involved a little bit in the presentation. So those will come up periodically. There'll be no score and there are no right or wrong answers. So in putting together this story, how do you get the information? How do you find what was preserved to put the story together? Well, there is this thing called the Michigan Tech Archives in the basement of the library, which is a great source of material. There's all sorts of things there. Not a lot on like skiing at Michigan Tech per se, but there are some ways to sort of get at that from the archives. So there's the photos I have. I can get into the old copies of the Load and the Mining Gazette, the athletic records, and that's where this filing cabinet is portrayed here, just to give you a sense of what's here. So that typical four-door filing cabinet, the hockey team here, I think there are about 8 of those four-drawer filing cabinets full of records from the 100 plus years now of hockey that's been going on at Michigan Tech. For skiing, in comparison, there is, you can see it right there. That is the open file drawer. And that part that's outlined in teal there, that is the entirety of the records from the athletic department of the ski team, other than what's online, which is a good thing and a bad thing. I'd hate to have to go through 8 four-door file drawers to find things. But on the other hand, there are a lot of holes and missing pieces here. So as many of you know, I cold called, emailed a lot of you. I've conducted interviews with you, and I thank you all so much for that. And the biggest source is this Ncaa yearbook, which I'll say a little bit more about soon. So it typically, something like this happens. I'll dig through those files that I was just showing you, and I come across a photo like this. And on the back is written 48-49 jumping team. It's torn in 2 pieces, and there's no other identification. So I take a picture of it with this identification that's there, and I file it away and see what might happen. And we'll come back to this particular picture in a little bit because it's kind of an interesting story. So the online records that are there are kind of old and have been transferred from paper records, and there are a lot of mistakes and omissions. There are lots and lots of skiers listed, but it doesn't indicate whether they were jumpers or alpine skiers or Nordic skiers, and there's just a lot of missing pieces. The alumni records were extremely helpful in helping me find you guys and find people to help with the project. And we've had a lot of great conversations over the phone, Zoom, and email, which I just loved. I've talked with people in many United States, talked with people in a couple Canadian provinces, United Kingdom and Norway, I believe, are the people that I've spoken with about this project, and not Norway, Michigan, Norway, the country. And it's all been so great. So the story starts here, and I start with this definition of synergy, which I'm sure you're familiar with. But I'm going to look at the synergy between 3 things to begin with: the place where Michigan Tech exists, the people who've been part of this area for a long time, and then the university kind of putting the last piece together, which didn't start as a university, started as a college. And what we get then is this mostly successful skiing program. And I've got mostly in parentheses there because it certainly is successful over time, but there's been a lot of highs and lows over the years. And that's part of what's been driving me to learn more and dig more into this project, is seeing, well, what happened to the team? Why does it disappear here? Why does it disappear here? So I'll get into a little bit of that as well. So we'll start with the Ncaa, where it's at. Now, most of you, of course, know where the Ncaa Peninsula is, but in terms of North America, it's pictured there on the left and then sticking out into Lake Superior. And then the big green depiction here shows the Ncaa and Lake Superior in this cross section that you might have seen. And the reason I'm showing that cross section that cuts through Isle Royale and through the Ncaa Peninsula is because it turns out to be pretty important in a couple of ways. So we're going to go back to start this history, just to make it challenging, about 1 billion years when this formation kind of happened. And I'm not a geologist, but that cross section is shown in the bottom part of the picture here. And it shows Isle Royale kind of to the left, and this big arching rock formation that's been pushed up with Lake Superior in the middle. And that is really important for two reasons. One is that the peninsula was pushed up and it's sticking up in the middle of this lake. And then also, this is what allowed this formation of minerals in this area. So Ncaa is where the snow happens. So the fact that this peninsula is pushed up in the middle of Lake Superior, we get the winds from the northwest, which is my little yellow arrow there, blowing across the lake. And I'm not a meteorologist either, but I think you probably know, and I can describe a little bit about the way lake effect snow works when this cold, dry air comes from Canada and from the Iron Range across Lake Superior, which is relatively warm. It picks up a lot of moisture. And then when it hits the Ncaa Peninsula, it's pushed upward, gets colder, and drops a lot of snow here. And there's a picture, you've probably seen pictures like that, historical pictures, that's in Calumet, of all the snow we get. So that's part of the ski team history, is the fact we live in this place that has lots and lots of snow. So that's that part. The other part is this geological formation allowed for the formation of the minerals in this area. And that's really what brought us here. The copper formations are here. The first miners were here over 4,000 years ago, digging around, scratching around on the earth that the glaciers had recently left, and finding this amazing metal called copper that they used. Eventually, an industrial society found this trove and came here and dug it out. And at some point, they needed a lot of workers, right? So they brought in workers from a lot of countries that had ski cultures, and some of them are listed here. And these people came in to work the mines. It was very hard work, but they did do a little bit of skiing, and there's some artifacts, some preservations that give evidence to this. So this middle picture here is a ski race in downtown Hancock. And if you walk down the sidewalk in Hancock, there's a lot of it that looks the same today. So that's a children's ski race that was taking place. I'm not sure when, but obviously some time ago. So we have the place, the Ncaa, which has the snow and the copper that brings the people. And a little more ski racing. This left-hand picture is a ski race which took place in Calumet. And I just love this picture because if you notice, like, everybody's got the same hat. So I'm guessing maybe for this race, they gave out hats. They've got kind of the same little uniform on. So I'm not sure exactly what's going on, but I just love their big fat sticks that they're using for ski poles. I just think they called them sticks back then. and their boots and everything about this picture is exciting. And then some jumping. That picture's from 1909, the jumping picture there in Calumet. And you can see, you could do an estimate on the crowd that's there, but it's a big crowd. And you can see maybe in the lower right, there's some people very, very dressed up for this thing. So it was a big, important thing. And they built the scaffold up there, and you can see a skier just starting to make his way down the scaffold. So there was a lot going on with skiing. And finally, the college started in 1985, and part of the university property was given by the Quincy Mining Company called Quincy Hill, which comes into play a little bit later. So when I'm digging through to find the history of skiing at Michigan Tech, I relied heavily on this book called The Ncaa, which a lot of you probably remember was a yearbook that was printed every year, and you got it at the end of the year. And it was just a typical school yearbook. It had pictures of the people, it had pictures of the organizations and of the athletic teams. And because the athletic records here are so sparse, that I used a lot of things from these books. And I'm through these covers on here, this is just a sampling of what I found. Was looking at all the covers of these books could be a book in itself. Someone could just do a book of the covers of the Ncaa, and it's pretty amazing, some of the artwork. There's one such book that actually has a copper cover. The cover of the book is made of copper, and it's pretty cool. Okay, so I'm going to just take one step back. Actually, I'm going to take many, many steps back. Okay, we're going to look at the big picture from kind of the beginning, where I've found, to the end, where I've found some preserved artifacts of ski racing, competitive skiing at Michigan Tech. So here's kind of the whole time span from just before 1930 to today. And so when an engineer does a history project, you get a graph. I didn't make this into a line graph, because a line graph sort of implies that you have a smooth trajectory between all these points. These are just some points, and I'll talk a little bit about why some of them are high, which means things are going pretty good for the team, and some of them are kind of low. So the green ones are high, and there's red ones low, and gray ones in the middle. And it's a very vague picture, but there are some reasons why I put those dots where I put them. Some of the times I know why they're there, like something, the team disappears and I know why it happened, but sometimes it's a little bit unclear. So I'll get into a little bit of this as we go. So basically the question is, how do we get from here with this kind of equipment, these kinds of techniques, this kind of competitive ski racing? You can see some of these people have bibs on, so they're definitely competing, to here, which is some highlights of this most recent year, which I will get to later. And we're going to do this one era at a time. So I took that big graph and I broke it up into sections. And we're going to look at each section. But before we do that, as I promised, there will be a test. And I'm going to just try out our poll system here. So I'm going to ask Tom if he can throw up a poll. And he's saying that he can't. So I will try to do it. And there we go. So I'm getting thumbs up in my room here. So I'm going to leave this up for 20, 30 seconds. Ooh, we're getting answers all over the place. And so what I'm seeing is that the number of answers and the percent of participation among you are up to 75% now. And it looks like it's slowing down, so I'll let it go just like 5, 6 more seconds. If you want to get something in, please vote now. 3, 2, 1. Oop. Okay, so we got to 80% there. The answer to that will come up later. just so you're aware, I guess I'll share results. I'll share the results here. Can you see the results? Looking at my panel here, and they say yes. So you can see how many people voted for which year. And we'll see in a little bit here what we get. Okay, what the answer is. Once again, my computer sticks every time. So I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to start sharing again. Okay, that took a long time, but there we go. So let's go through this. This is the fire hose edition of the entire history of skiing at Michigan Tech, competitive skiing at Michigan Tech, starting prior to World War II. We do have evidence of competitive skiing prior to the war. Then the war, the war begins, the United States enters the war, and not surprisingly, there's no information about skiing. I'll bet you that it still took place on some level, but there's just very, very little information about competitive skiing for World War II. So that's a short, and I'm going to spend a lot of time actually going through the years of that, just so I can show you the process of how I went through and how I'm collecting information about each of these eras. After World War II, then we get into what I'm calling these Lansdorff 1 and 2 eras. So in the first part of this, Lansdorff 1, and that name, many of you probably already know, but I'll explain why it's called that. Some important things happen, and you notice one of our green dots are there. And that is a little hint to the answer that we just looked at, or the question that I just asked you. And so we have a rising tide there. And then we get into this area where there's a lot of ups and downs. So this is the Lansdorff 2 era. There are certainly some positive things that happen. Women's skiing comes on the scene. There are some low points that to me were unexplainable. And then at the end of this, a lot of things come to an end. One is Fred's career at Michigan Tech, and also the ski team is cut from varsity status. So it enters what I'm calling a rebuilding era. And there's a lot of success that's happened here, but a lot of it isn't as an official varsity sport. Varsity skiing does return in this era, and then at the end, it is cut again. But quickly restored, which brings us to this era that I'm calling the one we're in now, Nordic Rising. And a lot of positive things are happening here, primarily in Nordic competitive skiing, because the varsity team is just a cross-country team during this era. So there you go. There's a whole history right there. But I've got a lot more details, and there are a lot more details. And here's what I said earlier, each of you or all of you and many, many, many more have skied this history into existence. And there are so many stories, some which will be a part of this eventual project. Many will be having to be added on later or not. But today, I'm just going to give kind of some slices through this graph as we go through here. Okay, so getting back to that pre-World War II era, this is the first ski race that I found documentation for on Michigan Tech's campus. So in the caption written here, it says, "I am ski race, MCM and technology, MCM and T Park." So that's Michigan College Mines and Technology, which is what this place was called before it became Michigan Tech University. Before it was called that, it was just the Michigan College of Mines. And it says MCM plus T Park, which I think is near where what is now the Rose Center. For a long time, it was the Sherman Gym, but I think that's where this took place. I found this picture in the archive, but I also found it in the Michigan Tech load. along with an article, which I'll say a little bit more about in a second. And the caption for this was the start of the ski marathon. Turns out the marathon, there were two races. There was one 1 mile long and one which was a half-mile long, which by today's standards, I don't think we would call a marathon. But in 1928, at this time, they did. The skiers are identified in that Load article, and there are a pair of twins, Gene and Ed Hotchkiss, and then Bill Audio, who I think is a community member, and then this person, this fourth person here, kind of in the middle, who I call Harry Potter. They're wearing spectacles and they just don't look really super enthusiastic, and they're not really identified at all. So I'll just let you read these pieces. This is the Load article written by this fellow called Walter Neckersall. So you can see he calls this man Audio, pushed the Hotchkiss boys pretty hard here. If he'd had better skis and some good sticks, the story might have turned out a little differently. I'm just going to go back to that picture for a second. So you can see the skis, especially the ones that this Audio. So he's the guy in the white shirt. It looks kind of like they're pointed at both ends. It's hard to tell in this picture, but I'll bet you those are homemade skis, and they've got these big, thick sticks that they're using as ski poles. The other part of this article was particularly funny. One of the things I'm interested in, and through this whole history, is, you know, where the women's competitive skiing comes in, and it comes in pretty darn early, as you can see back in 1928. The Reapy Girls. So these are community members who took place in Winter Carnival. Winter Carnival, by the way, started the year before this, and then this was the second Winter Carnival. But you can see that Edna and Alice were awesome. They skied in, won the races, and skied home. And as William says, if we had more women like these, Winter Carnival would be a huge success, and may they live to be 190. Okay, so what I'm doing is a year by year, basically, compilation of photos, news pieces, stories from participants, various artifacts and many shared by participants. And today I'm going to skip most years. So the previous couple slides were what I've got from that first year, 1928. I don't have anything then for a little while until we get to the next year. So I'm just going to kind of show you my methodology here. So I'll look in the yearbook if there's anything about skiing in the yearbook, and there's typically a photo of skiers or of a group of skiers, like here is in a club sort of setting. I have the cover of the particular year there to remind me of the year. And then I summarize kind of the high points, low points, and any other historical things that I might find from elsewhere over somewhere else in the slide. So I'm building this gigantic slide deck, essentially, of a year by year history that is part of this. And if I went through every year, we'd be here forever. And so I'm not going to show you every year, but I am going to show you a lot of this particular era. But one of the things I wanted to point out here, or a couple things, there is racing going on, and they talk about some racing. So that qualifies as competitive skiing at Michigan Tech. They mentioned Quincy Hill ski facility. And a lot of these articles have these aspirational tone to them. And this is an example, the quote I have at the bottom there. If the increasing interest in skiing leads to the success it should, Tech will become the Dartmouth of the Middle West. That's pretty aspirational. And there's a lot of that you see in here about people who are just so excited about skiing and where it's gonna go. And sometimes everybody's really excited. There's a lot of energy that you can detect from the yearbooks and the newspapers and stuff. And then some years it isn't there. Oh, and the last thing, up in the upper right, a lot of these slides you might, and I'm not going to talk about this beyond here, but in the upper, I've often got this little green arrow pointing up or to the side or down. And that's just to indicate that during this year, the trajectory was, in this case, going up. And it's kind of an indicator to me. But if you see those, that's what it means. So it kind of is aligned with that graph that I was showing earlier. The following year, they say a little bit more about the club. There's this Michigan State Championships, which are held during Winter Carnival. Winter Carnival is a really important part of competitive skiing at Michigan Tech. It turns out there for many, many years, they had ski competitions as part of Winter Carnival. Really I think from the second year Winter Carnival on for a very long time. There were other meets here, and you can see they've even skied in Sun Valley for the National Collegiate Open Championships. In this year, there's mention of the Ski Patrol, which is a very early mention that Ski Patrol happened here quite early in the history of Ski Patrol. And instead of calling it Quincy Hill, it's now called Ripley Hill. And once again, these aspirational statements about laying the foundation for making Michigan's Copper Country the winter sports center of America. That's pretty high aspiration. A little side note here is this particular year, lack of snow postponed Winter Carnival until February, and it worked so well that they just kept it there, and it's still there. Okay. The following year, you can see there's a ski club. There's now a picture of a bunch of skiers out at Ripley Hill. And the text says that it lists 40 men. There's affiliation with USSA and the Central U.S. Intercollegiate Ski Union. And Tech placed first in the Michigan State Intercollegiate Ski Championships in Cadillac. So that's at Caberfait. And so this is kind of the very beginning of what you'd call the golden age of skiing in Michigan, where throughout the 40s and 50s, especially after the war, there were just lots and lots of ski hills that popped up all over the place. And skiing was very, very popular in the state. So again, there's strong evidence here of competitive skiing at the college or at Michigan Tech. Following year, you can see there's some real jocular writing and some kind of silly photos over there. At least they look silly to me. I'm not sure if they were intended that way at the time or not. But you notice instead of ski club, it says ski team. And this is the year that the US got into World War II. So skiing is really gaining steam before we get into the war. And then, as you might guess, the steam gets let out. It says here, skiing finally became a minor sport, whatever that means, but there is some financial support and there are letter awards, it says. There's downhill and slalom with plans to build a jump and add cross country. So again, some aspirations there. And I'd say that the ski team is kind of on the rise. But then World War II hits, and this next year, there's really no mention of racing. It doesn't say ski team, it says club now. But the real reason I want to show you this is this quote here, I think is quite funny about the boys looking forward to entertaining the co-eds from Rockford College, which is down in Rockford, Illinois. You can read into that message maybe whatever you want, but again, this is written by college kids, and I think it's both the picture itself with the skis and things, and the commenting is kind of entertaining. So we're going to have another poll here, except the way these polls are working. So you can't help me, huh, Tom? Okay, let me see if I can get the right one up. Okay, I think I understand the process, and I'm going to launch the next poll. And is it there? Okay, The 10th Mountain Division fought in which European country at the end of World War II? So last time we got to about 80%. So I want to at least get to that, which we've just surpassed. So I'll let it go another 6 or 7 seconds here. Okay, we'll end it. We'll share the results. And the answer to this one is Italy. And you got it. So good for you. And I'm going to stop sharing that. Shut this off. I'm going to see if my computer works, and it does. Awesome. So I just want to talk a little bit about the influence of World War II. There was a 2-year stoppage of the yearbook. Very little news about skiing. So essentially, skiing goes away for a little while. Competitive skiing in Michigan Tech. But the 10th Mountain Division at the very end of the war lands in Italy. And one of the members of the 10th Mountain Division, which is why I brought up the question, is Fred Lansdorff. And he turns out to be a very important figure. I named those 2 eras after him because he was a big part of Michigan Tech skiing over all of that time. After the war, he remained in Europe, does some ski racing, does some ski race observation. And he's one of the many 10th Mountain guys that came back and had a tremendous influence on skiing and ski culture in the United States in all sorts of ways. And there's a whole histories that have been written about that. Interestingly to me, the Upper Peninsula and Northern Wisconsin and Minnesota, a lot of the 10th Mountain guys came from there. And they called these, a lot of people called this division the ski troops, even though very little of their fighting, almost none of it was done on skis, but they did a lot of training out in Colorado. And in Washington on skis. Okay, so moving on to this next era, Lansdorff 1. This is where a couple of big things, NCAA begins, and we have our best NCAA. So now I'm not going to spend nearly as much time on these next eras. I'm going to give a real quick fly through about them. But some of the highlights of this particular one, there was a lot of program growth. There were some ties to Scandinavian countries, which I mean by that, I mean Scandinavian skiers came over and competed for Michigan Technological University. NCAA starts and Michigan Tech joins after that and then has a really good finish. So just a few sample years. This is the first year that Fred Lansdorff appears in his awesome hat that I have kind of circled there. You'll see more of the hat, and we'll do more about Fred later. Again, strong ties to Winter Carnival. You can see the carnival beards there. Typical ski club photos of this era are so awesome, largely because of these amazing sweaters. You could spend a lot of time just looking at the sweaters in these pictures, and they become useful actually in identifying people, because you'll see somebody in a sweater unidentified in one place, but then you can come back and find their sweater and usually their face to see what their name is in these documentation. So it's great. It's the first time I found documentation of women on skis and in the club. 4 of the 49 people in that picture are women, or that I can identify as women. Fred is the president. He's also starts to do ski instruction and becomes a state champion. And again, this aspirational note, it's only natural to expect big things from such an enterprising group. You can see Fred's hat up there in the upper right in that photo, and we'll see more of that later. More about the carnival. This picture on the upper left is just students and people crowding onto the train, which is going to take them over to Ripley for the events at Winter Carnival. This is also an interesting year because on the cover of the Keweenawan is skiing. And so a trivia question, which I'm not asking here, but if you ever want to ask a question, and the only sport to be depicted on the cover of the Q&A one. And I think they're like 62 printed versions of the Q&A. The only sport is skiing. And there you see it. And it is just a great depiction. I just love it. And you can see Fred's hat again there with his pins, probably many of which came from Europe. And he's working on his skis. This next year, this is the first year that letter winners were recorded by the athletic department, but we know earlier that letters were given out. And so again, this is one of those places where there's some a hole in the data in what was preserved. 102 club members, pretty impressive. Night skiing, I can't imagine what night skiing was like in 1947 over Mount Ripley, but it sounds kind of dangerous lighting that place up. They got the tow operating. They include jumping now. They use, instead, if you remember before, skiing was called a minor sport. Now here it's called a major sport. And there's 7 women in these 2 photos. So a lot going on. This is like really the big wave of skiing in the Midwest. This is a pamphlet. You can see Fred's hat there a couple more times. And this pamphlet is really the first place I found marketing the whole area and the college to the greater public from about skiing, right? Like marketing the skiing here. The Alps of the Midwest, I don't think we use that anymore, but maybe that's something the Chamber of Commerce could go back to. And a lot of interesting stuff in this that we don't have time to talk about. This year, there's a couple of things I want to point out here, almost, well, one thing in each photo. So I'm going to start in the lower right where the jumper is. If you notice, there's a jumper there. I've got blue circles around because when you first look at this picture, you might think there's trees lining, but those are people lining the side of this ski jump landing. If you ski at Mount Ripley today, there's a place called Fred's Landing, and that is Fred's Landing. Fred Lansdorff was instrumental in getting it going. So it's just amazing how many people. I'm guessing this is at Winter Carnival by the numbers of people there. You could, again, do an estimate, but there's got to be 1,000 people, I would say, at Mount Ripley for this thing. This was the above that picture is the Quonset hut that was called the Husky Hut, and it still exists in Ripley, not in the same place, but it is there. And finally, the upper left picture, that person was identified as Mark Cross by someone I interviewed, Gwen Knabel. And I just love it because it really exemplifies what we all love. We just love sliding on the snow. And this guy just having such an awesome time in his awesome sweater. And that little move, one of my interviewees, John Kotar, told me that's called Galundesprung is what he's doing there. And that might be on a test later. Okay, and some more pictures, some interesting things. Like all of a sudden, there's no women identified in this club photo, although there are some amazing sweaters. Again, their meets held at Ripley, and the fellow on the right-hand picture there is a guy who was a very strong skier here at Michigan Tech for a long time, and has quite amazing technique for the equipment that he had back then. Okay, so time to wake up. We're going to do another poll here, actually a couple of them. I'm going to I think I'm learning how to do this. So we're going to highest NCAA finish. Here we go. What is Michigan Tech's highest overall placing? So this means Alpine and Nordic skiing combined. Okay, you guys are getting fast. We're up to 80% now. I'm going to close this in about 5 seconds. 3, 2, One, terrific. End the poll, and I'll share the results with you. This is what folks said, and I'm not too surprised. This is not a trick question, but we'll get to the answer in a little bit. That one, and I'm going to launch a second poll here. Whoops. There we go. So what year was that highest placing? You guys are awesome. This is wonderful. So great to see participation, because I'm just talking to an empty room. Well, not quite empty. Sorry, Tom. But okay, we'll give it 5 more seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. You guys are the best. And the poll, I'm going to show you the results you said. And again, we will show the answer in a little bit. Before we get there, this is another just typical thing, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but I showed you this picture earlier. But this fellow who's circled here, it turns out I was able to find out who that was, and actually have an email correspondence with this person. His name's Dick Jutin, and he is also this person in these pictures. And when I found these pictures in the files, there's nothing with them. It's just these random pictures of this mysterious number 17 skier. And with help from the Alumni Association and others, I was actually able to have an email correspondence with this person, and he had these same pictures in his personal album, and it was really an amazing moment to talk to this guy, or email back and forth with this person. It takes a lot of guts to do what he's doing. If you go out to Fred's landing today and look at where they were doing this, and even some people I interviewed who were jumpers said that was the most dangerous jump in the Midwest for many reasons. One of which is we get so much snow here, it was very difficult to maintain the landing area. Moving along quickly here. This stuck out because of the picture that's shown of the team. This is the first time there's really like a picture of a team with all their bibs on, and you can see there's a lot of camaraderie there. They have the 4 event championships were held in Houghton. So 4 event championships, that means that one person or a team combination does 4 events, which is the downhill, the slalom, jumping, and cross country. Sometimes one person does all 4, or sometimes there's a team. Anyway, so cross country skiing is going on here now. And then this picture, I'm sure this year, I'm sharing 51, 52. Again, to show several things. One, interestingly, there's a lot of women in these 2 pictures, like 30% of the club members, according to these 2 pictures, are women, which is kind of amazing. The picture on the right, or the stuff on the right, is a party being held in the Husky Hut, and you can see Coach Lansdorff there pouring liquid into somebody's glass, and the caption says, "Why, ginger ale, of course," which again I love. And under that, you can see there's something about the ski team. So there's not just a ski club, there's also a ski team at this point in time, and some results up in the upper right. So this is the year men's skiing became an NCAA sport, 53, 54. Michigan Tech didn't participate here, but we did win the Michigan Intercollegiate Ski Championship against these other schools. Interesting that they had ski teams and participated. So the University of Michigan, Michigan State, Central, Wayne, and Western were all part of that. And Michigan Tech was, of course, the champions. Just a little bit about NCAA skiing, and I don't have a lot of time to spend here, but it's had an interesting history from 1953 to today. Michigan Tech has been in it, out of it, back in it, and we remain in it today as part of NCAA. But the sport has changed over time. They used to have a downhill event. They stopped. It was too dangerous. Today, they have slalom and giant slalom. And then in the cross-country part of it, they have skating and freestyle and classic. And they switch those distances up. And it's probably going to change, right, Tom? There's more changes on the horizon here, but there's been a lot of events that have happened in the past. So this 4 event that I was talking about, that was an NCAA thing. So one person would do all 4 events, and that winner of that was called the Ski Meister. It was the Ski Meister competition, and that went from 1954 to 1973. Ski jumping went all the way to 1980 before it was discontinued as NCAA sport. And some people find that quite surprising, me included, as I looked into this. We are down to just about 6 minutes left, so I'm going to go pretty fast here. But this 55 is when cross-country, a cross-country team as its own thing kind of appears. The team photo there, you can see we got these great sweaters with the white stripe through them. This next year has whoever was in charge of the Keweenawan this year must have been a skier, because there's just so much, including this poem, which I cannot find an author for, or this little poetry, I should say. I'll just give you a few seconds to read it. And without saying anything about it, I'm going to move ahead. But this is definitely a rising tide during this mid-50s time for competitive skiing at Michigan Tech. We have these great, awesome sweaters. We have a lot more about cross-country and all the disciplines written up. We got a great picture of this technique here, which I believe is called reverse shoulder technique, going through gates, which Fred learned that while he was in Austria after World War II. In the late 50s, then success continues. This is an interesting year because there's a news article that I found relates that 8 Norwegian athletes tried out for the ski team, which is pretty remarkable. Some of them were quite good. And this one fellow listed on the left, John Eric Stenberg, he and I have had some great email back and forth. He lives in Oslo today, and has just been great in relating his stories about coming to Michigan Tech on a boat and arriving here knowing very little English. And I looked into, like, why are all these Norwegians coming right now? Well, at this particular time, they needed engineers. They needed technical people in their country, and they didn't have a 4-year technical college. They had 2-year colleges. So a lot of those guys were coming over here to finish that and get their degree. And so we had a real influx of this all over the country, but especially at Michigan Tech, or significantly at Michigan Tech. Since this is this Lansdorff era, the first part of it, I just want to say a little bit more about him. As he's inducted in the UP Sports Hall of Fame, this was the write-up. As you can see, quite an amazing person, and the work he did here is almost unbelievable, really. He's from Iron Mountain, did some ski racing, went to University of Wisconsin, volunteered for the ski troops, 10th Mountain Division, which we talked about, was here, employed 34 years. He was here, I think, oh no, I guess he was here 45 to 79. He was employed in 47. A lot of accolades to his name, and a lot of fun things too. Several people commented on how he was a very heavy smoker, which if you read about the 10th Mountain Division history, you can certainly understand why someone who went through that might start smoking. He's a great dancer. And interestingly, he was a very enthusiastic racer of motorboats. And I just love this picture of him and his daughter. And I really got to thank Lynn, and I'm probably going to pronounce your last name wrong, Lynn, but Lynn and Righty, one of his other daughters, for giving me so much great information about Fred. That awesome hat, he wore many hats, and these are just a few of them. Hard to imagine one person doing all this, but through all the interviews and things about Fred, he was a teacher. He was a teacher and a mentor, and he really helped so many people in so many ways. And that's what really came through. I'm going to have to end here pretty quickly. But I want to get to a few things. One of them is here, this poll. Boy, I sure appreciate all of your participation. This is really heartening to see you out there. Okay, give about 5 more seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, I'm going to end the poll. I'm just going to show you what you said. Kind of a lot of mixed answers here. And I'm going to stop sharing this. So in this Lansdorff 2 is when women's skiing starts in the 70s. There was a lot of unsteady times here. There was a lot of ebb and flow of the ski team. A lot of good NCAA results, a lot of good participation across the board. One of you shared this amazing picture of winning the varsity blanket, which maybe many of you have, but this was a blanket that you were given if you were on the ski team, and the number of stars is the number of letters you won in the ski team. So Gary, thank you for sharing this picture with me. A separate cross-country team starts to be recognized here, and they're in the front row of that top picture. So there's more discipline specific. Instead of skiing just being skiing, there's a lot of differentiation that starts to happen here. I'm sorry, I'm going to go really fast here for a few times because I want to get to just a couple more things. Back to Fred just for a minute. Fred Lansdorff made this trophy for one of you, Doug Hill, who's in the picture there and shared this picture with me. But this was in 1967, and Doug still has this as one of his possessions. And it tells you a lot about how important Fred is to so many of you guys, to keep a Coke cup covered in tinfoil with a piece of tape written on it as this trophy. Fred helped get the chalet going, and this is when it was dedicated in 1967. In 1970, the yearbook prior says the outlook is very much in doubt, and the team kind of disappears. Why this happens, I'm not sure, but it really does. In this particular year, so we're to 69-70 now, you can see it's very strange. No women appear in the club photo. There's no team, but there is a pistol club, crazily. And they're taking pictures with pistols in their hands, pointed at each other. And there are women in the pistol club, but none in the ski club. So for many years, for this particular year, there are several strange instances of things happening around the ski team. In the early 70s, then cross country seems to start making a comeback. A notable skier, Roger Percuri, is here. Some important Norwegians again, Tor Arnhoff and Osbjørn Snekevik, which you could write a whole lot about just Asbjørn, who I spoke with. He's in Norway now. For this particular era, but cross country really starts to be separated from the rest of the ski team in here. Notice it says 1972 ski teams. So they're talking about separate teams, cross country and alpine. 74, 75. So this is the first year of varsity competition for women. So those of you who said this, excellent, well done. There's no cross country, but it's interesting because there's a figure here, Karen Henry, who appears on the alpine team, and she goes on to start the women's cross country ski team. As she put it, she was on the alpine team this year. The next year she got cut from the team or couldn't make the alpine team, but she started a cross country team. And here it says the women have also started a cross country team. So this is 76 now. And we had to have an XC team to go to AIAW Nationals. So I learned cross country ski. I'm out of time and I really want to respect your time. I'm going to move ahead through two more things. I'm sorry. In the 1980 season, the ski teams were officially cut from the varsity sports program at Michigan Tech. And this remained so for just about a decade. But a lot of people hung in there. Some clubs were started, a club sport was started instead of varsity, and kind of kept things going through this time. And there were some great performances by a lot of people. And it's a big part of the history. And it really leads up to the next big era. But there were some national championships as a club sport in both cross country and alpine. So these were some amazing performances back in those days, even though it was a club. We did come back to varsity status. We then came back to NCAA and have been in NCAA ever since '92. And now we come to this Nordic rising. So we rise and we rise up on our heels because it is Nordic skiing. And so our last poll. Are you getting that? Okay. Wow. There are still 50 of you here. Hang on, folks. We're gonna wrap this up pretty quick, but okay, we're down to our last 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You're wonderful. Thank you so much. This is what you said. 1, 2, and 4, and one person guessed 10. Just going to stop that for a second. So previous to this ski Olympian, there were 10 hockey players to have been on Olympic teams. So that's 10 Michigan Tech hockey players. So 10 Michigan Tech athletes had been on Olympic teams. They were all hockey players. So this person is the first non-hockey and the first female to earn this achievement. And it is Deidra Irwin. It happened in the Beijing Olympics, and she's the only one of the records that we've been able to come up with between the athletic department and me. So that was very exciting. And that just happened this year. So in this modern era, we've gone from that picture way back in 1928 to Deidra getting 7th place in the Beijing Olympics this year. And that was in biathlon, by the way, not cross-country skiing. And she is now Sergeant Deidra Irwin, by the way, which is awesome. She's in the Vermont National Guard. We had 3 All-Americans. Annabelle Needham is on the left of the 3 there. Ncaa Skiing is in the middle, and Skylar Patton is the 3rd one from Park City. and the championships were in Park City this year. So he got to do that in his hometown, which is awesome. So truly Nordic rising and still rising. In this era, we had some major trail rehab. Just so many great things have happened. And there is a lot of documentation about this because we're also entering the digital era during this time. So there's plenty of material on what's happened since about 2000. But we have a world-class Nordic facility here, and we have world-class skiers skiing here. And it's really amazing how far we've come and the up and down road that we've followed to get here. I'm just going to leave you with this quote, which is from today's coaches. If you read the last newsletter, you read this before. And it's really about this. You don't get to today's results without this. Everybody's pulling their part along the way. So I thank you very, very much. Who knows if there's questions out there? I think Tom might know, but I'll hang on and see if we can answer questions, and then, but I'll say goodbye and let you go. Thank you, thank you, thank you.